We're just going to jump right into it. So I'm going to be going through how to enter general atlasing data into the atlas, as well as point count data. I'll go through a quick thing about entering your checklist through eBird, and then we're also going to take a look quickly at how to enter data in the NatureCounts app as well. So again, ask questions as we go along, and that's perfectly great. So where you're going to find to begin entering your data is on the Newfoundland Breeding Bird Atlas website, which you can see here. And if you go through any of these tabs, you'll find lots of important information, really great information. And when you have a chance, take a look at all of it. Really good stuff is going to be in the tools and resources section. That's going to have a lot of your data sheets, your instructions, and things like that. This is also where you're going to find the spot where you can click to enter data. So you go to tools and resources, enter data, and it will redirect you to the NatureCounts page. NatureCounts is just the database that Birds Canada uses for all of their data from the different programs. And if you've signed up for the Atlas, which I think most of you have that are in here, you're going to just log in here using your username and password that you signed up for the Atlas with. So I'll just go in with mine, and you click sign in. And then it'll bring you right to the data entry page here. I often just sort of bookmark this page, so I don't have to go through a whole bunch of different steps to get here, but whatever works best for you. And once you're on here, you're just going to start by, if you've already made up a checklist when you're out atlasing, there's a few different ways of getting to the spot that you were. So the first one is you can just zoom right in to the place where you were. So you can use the zoom button, or if you have a mouse, you can scroll with your mouse. So I'm just going to go up here close to Corner Brook. And you just keep on zooming in, and eventually a square box will show up. And so if you're within this area, then great. This square box will show up, and it'll show you what the square number is up here in the top. So that's one way to get to a spot. Then you can click on the map and things like that. Another way to get to the spot that you were atlasing is, if you know what the square number is and you don't want to zoom into the map, you can click on Find Square up here. Find Square. And then it'll pop up this little window here, and you can either enter the square number or you can enter in coordinates in a few different formats. So you just enter a square number. I'll just put one in here. And then you click Find Square, and it pops up at the bottom. You can click on it, and it'll zoom right to the square that you're interested in. So that's really useful if you already know what the square number is and you want to find it. One other way you can find your checklist location on the map is to select a square from your personal list. You'll see this drop-down menu here. The way that you put squares into this menu is by zooming in on the map. You just have to do this once to get it into that drop-down. Zoom in on the map where you want to be, and then you name the square whatever you want to say. So you can name my square or whatever you want to, and then you click Save. And then it'll show up in this list here. And then you can just click on which square it is in your list, and it'll bring you right to where it is. This is really great for people who've signed up for squares, and so they're often going to the same area, so they don't have to zoom in on a map all the time. They can just go to their square like that. So those are 3 ways you can get to where you want to be. I'll just go back to here because there's less points on it. Okay. So once you've zoomed into your square or found your square in some fashion, you can keep zooming in to the place where you were atlasing. And there's a few different observation types. You can pick a single location. That's going to be if you're doing like a sea watch, if you're at your bird feeder, anything like that. You can also use it just as the starting location of a hiking trail if you don't want to draw in the route that you are going. So you can just zoom in as far as you can and click on exactly where you started. Then you're going to need to enter a site name. So you'll just write in a name. You can put yeah, you can call it whatever you want to. I'll just put test here because I'm going to have to delete it later. And so that's how you put in an individual stationary point or starting with 1 point. You can also draw a traveling count. So this is, let's say you're walking along a street or you're walking a trail and you want to put in exactly where you went. You can click traveling count. And then instead of putting only 1 point, you're just going to click different points and it's going to make a little trail for you. And at the last point, you can double click and it completes that trail for you. If you've made a mistake, you can go up to the top of the map and click stop drawing. And then you can move points around to wherever it is that you thought they should be. And then when you're done that, you can click start drawing again. So that's for a traveling count. You can also have an area search. And this works much the same way as the traveling count. So you're clicking and drawing points, but this time you're looking in an entire area. So if you're searching a park or forest, and it will connect to the first point to the last and then fills in this box. That's the area that you've looked in. So you're only using that if you are in fact covering this entire area rather than just going around the perimeter, for example. For all of these, you're entering a site name. And if you don't, it will give you a warning to go do that at the end. You can also use an entire square, which then fills in the whole square. This can be if, for example, you're not really sure where in the square you were, but you know you were in this square, or if you're at somebody's property who doesn't want the location to be known, that sort of thing. But this is not as useful to the atlas because then certain observations can't be tied to habitat, which is what can happen if you're putting in a more specific location. So we do urge you to put a single location, a traveling count, or an area search when you can, but you can use entire square if you need to. So I'll just pick a single location for now because it's a bit easier here. You can also, I forgot to mention, click on these predetermined hotspots, which are brought in from eBird. And so then the name is already there as well. Or you can click your own point. So we'll just click our own point and call it test. Perfect. Another way you can add a point to the map is by putting in coordinates. So that'll be in this box here. You can either enter them in lat long or UTM coordinates. And then we just go down farther and you'll need to enter the observation date of when you did your checklist. We'll say it was today. You enter the start time. Say it was 6:30 this morning. You enter the duration, how long you were out atlasing. We'll say it was only half an hour. How many observers, and how far you went. This one's optional. You don't necessarily have to put this in. We'll say we went 1 kilometer. Okay, so there's a few different options down here. The first one I'll talk about is incidental observations. So incidental observations are, like it says, you're checking the box if birding was not your primary purpose. So for example, you're driving somewhere and you go past a pond that has a loon in it that has a baby on its back, and you want to put that into the atlas because it's really good breeding evidence. But you weren't intending to go atlasing just then. It was just sort of an accidental observation. So you would click this box, incidental observations. It gets rid of the duration, so it takes out the effort. But everything else you can still enter. You don't have to enter a distance. That's fine as well for incidental observation. If you are intending to go atlasing or birding, don't check this box. If you're typically going to be reporting a complete checklist. You can click yes or no here. Typically, you're going to be reporting a complete one of all the birds you were able to identify. That's a typical day or morning out atlasing. However, if you're, for example, some people are doing surveys for other species, that kind of thing, and they're only paying attention to certain species and eliminating others, then you can click no, it's not a complete checklist because you are specifically eliminating some species. But typically, you're clicking yes for this. And then you can click whether or not you're completing atlas point counts We're going to keep it as no for now. We'll go back to yes in a little bit. But let's keep going. So we'll just put this back in here. I'll address this when we talk about point counts as well. And I'll come back to talk about eBird in a little bit. So we're just going to continue as we are entering it straight into NatureCounts here. So you click continue, and then it goes on to the next page. So the important thing here is take a look at this top information, make sure it's all correct and what you intended to write in there. If it's not, you can go to change site or effort, and it'll bring you back to that previous page. You can change anything that you want there. We'll just scroll down. This is where you're going to find the entire list of bird species. And you'll also see, if you go right to the very bottom, just keep on going, you're going to have red squirrels here at the very bottom. We are interested in knowing where people are finding red squirrels, which I realize is often sort of everywhere. But there are places where squirrels are not. And because they're newer to the island, we're interested in knowing what sort of effects might be having on bird populations. So do take care to put in squirrel observations when you do find them. Okay, so when you're in this list of species, you can scroll through the list of species to look for the one that you're interested in. Alternatively, you can search for a species. So let's say we were looking for a blackpoll warbler. We can type that in, and it pops up, and you can click on it, and then it comes up to the top. So you can look for a species like that. In the case where a species is not showing up in this list, it might be because it's a rare species. So you can click on show rarities, and that will add a whole bunch of species to this list. See if I hopefully haven't broken this. Okay, so it adds a whole bunch of species here, as you can see. So it's really overwhelming. Then it's really important to be searching for a species that will really help you in that case. So I'm going to unclick this for now again. Okay. You can also click on show subspecies and forms, and that can be helpful if you have, for example, like a mallard American black duck hybrid, then that sort of thing will show up in this list, as well as, for example, woodpecker species, in case you're not sure what it is. This kind of thing is going to show up in show subspecies and forms. Only show species expected to breed in the Atlas region can be helpful if you want to cut down on a species list, because there are certain species that are not usually found in some regions. So you can use this. And you can also click on only show species with data. And that's nice if you've already put in some information and you just want to take a look at what you've got, or edit something that you have. You can only show species with data. And then it will show you just that table. Okay, so we're just going to talk about adding information here. So let's say we had a Canada goose. There was only one of them, so you put 1 under count. That's how many you saw in total. You're going to enter breeding evidence, that's this here, BE, and it's a drop-down menu. It has all of these codes. I always have the list of breeding evidence codes and their names and the explanation out with me when I'm atlasing, or on the computer as well sometimes while I'm entering my data, just in case you're not sure what any of the letters mean. But yes, you do just click on one of these. So let's say I saw a Canada goose. There was a pair of Canada geese, and so I put P for pair. As you can see, it comes up with this exclamation mark here. This is just a warning. You can click on it, and it will tell you why it gave you a warning for that. So for example here, caution, male and female are alike, behavior clues are essential. So this just shows you there's different levels. Invalid is red, unusual is yellow, and caution is green. So they'll explain each of them to you. but it just tells you to be careful when you're using this. Make sure it's actually the code that you want. So you can close this again. If you're sure it's the one you want, you leave it. If you're not sure and you think there's a different one that's better, you try and click down on the arrow, but only the P is still there. So you just have to erase what you have in that box, and then the entire list comes up again, and that you can find that in there. Oh, I see there's things popping in the box, actually, in the chat. Let me just check here. There's a question of whether you can use 4-letter codes when you're searching for species names. Yes, you can. If you know the 4-letter code, absolutely, it should work to pop up a species. And how can you enter P if you're only reporting one bird? That's a wonderful question. You could not, you couldn't say P if there's only one bird. So I would definitely have to put this as a 2 if I want to say that there's a pair of them. Good. Okay, so there's also this section where you can add details. If you just click on that, you can enter details that help confirm identification or breeding code used. So that's really important as well for rare species. You want to explain how you got to the identification, what sort of habitat you found it in, that kind of thing that can help our regional coordinators when they're looking through these records later to make sure that it's actually a breeding evidence code that is correct, and also a species that could be there. You can enter also specific coordinates for that one bird if you want to. And the capability isn't there to put in media files yet, but will be one day. And so once you're done in here, you can press close and it saves it. Okay, let's see if I'm missing anything here. Okay, for rare species, see if I can find something. An Iceland gull, for example, you can't write in breeding evidence. So this is again where it's going to be really important in your detail section to say what you saw the species doing, so that breeding evidence can be added by a regional coordinator when they're going through the data later on, if there is in fact a breeding evidence code that should be put there. Okay, is there any questions about this sort of section before we carry on? Just let me know. I'll urge you to use this submit button sort of more as a save button. NatureCounts, the website, sometimes has glitches or crashes or produces errors, that kind of thing. So if you are making an especially long list, or if you're doing point count data and stuff like that, where it's a bit more extensive, I definitely urge you to use submit as more as a save button. It doesn't go anywhere except for right here. So let's say we submitted it just now. It tells you your summary here. Take a look and see if it's all correct, and at the top as well. If you're using it as a save rather than submit, you can always just click on change species list and it kicks you right back to that last page. You can just keep adding things in. So I will recommend that you use that option if you're putting in sort of longer lists or point count data. You can also click share with eBird. I already have my eBird account connected, but you can click share with eBird, and then you just put in your information, and you can click save eBird login in the profile, and then it automatically puts each of your checklists in through eBird as well. Or you can just do it one by one. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to the beginning of this checklist, and we'll turn it into a point count instead, because I think there's some people here that are probably doing point counts. So a lot of it is much the same. When you're doing point counts, you're still going to zoom into your map and click on your starting point. You can, down at the bottom here, click on show point count locations, and then we'll go back up to the map again. And as you can see, all of these new blue locations are on here. You can't click on them at this stage, but it can be useful if you want to know sort of where you started that day. You can put your point close to one of them. So that can be really helpful. If you're doing point counts, you have a couple of options of how you're going to enter them. You can either enter one checklist for each point count if you're not doing general atlasing between them, and then you'd choose pick a single location. Or alternatively, if you're doing, say, a morning of point counts, and you're going to spend a few hours doing them and your general atlasing between them, you can pick traveling count. And then you can sort of draw your route of where you went to, and then you'll be able to put in the point counts later. So we'll just leave it as traveling count right now. I'm going to put this length a little bit longer. We'll say 120 minutes. The distance, I forgot to mention this earlier. When you're putting a traveling count in, this distance automatically updates. But if it's wrong, you can always change it. The same thing if you're doing an area search, an area box will show up and will automatically calculate that as well. Okay, so if we're doing point counts, then we're saying we're doing a complete checklist, and we say, yes, we're doing Atlas point counts. And then we click continue. Oh, I didn't put a name in apparently. So I need to put a name in. Okay. Click continue. Okay, so here we're on the next page now. It has these point count locations again. So make sure everything is correct up here. And then it encourages you to enter your point count locations and times. So you can either add coordinates manually by using coordinates. This is going to be if you're doing off-road point counts, and so you've created your own point location, then you'll add it in like that. Or you can, oh, sorry, getting lost here. You can just click on the point count here. So let's say I did this one first, and then I went to 14, and I just did those two. And then they show up here at the bottom with the point count number 1 and 14. And then you just add the start time. So I say I did the first one at 6:30 when I started my checklist, and I did the second one at 7:15. You just put those in and click continue. Again, check and make sure everything at the top is correct. You have all the same buttons here about which species you want to show, adding rare species and things like that. You can again search for species. Here, the big difference is that instead of just one column for count, one column for count and breeding evidence, you're going to have these extra ones for point counts. So it has, this is my first point count at 6:30. This is my second point count at 7:15. And it has the time blocks, 1 to 3 minutes and 4 to 5 minutes for each of the locations. So over here in the count section, this is for your general atlasing only. So let's say I saw 2 Canada geese when I was not doing my point counts, I put them in here. If I saw 1 Canada goose during my first point count in the first 3 minutes, I put it here. And I saw none in the second half of the point count. In my second point count, I saw 1 in the first section as well. I put them there. And so then it puts your total up to 3 Canada geese because, 4 Canada geese because you saw 2 outside of point counts and you saw 2 within your point counts. The breeding evidence section here is the highest breeding evidence that you had through the entire time. And you can add details again, just as you would before. Again, red squirrels are right down at the bottom of the checklist, so definitely go down to the bottom here to put in how many you had, and you can also add in comments as well. Okay, so that's basically the only things that are different for entering point count data. If you have more than 5 point counts, this drop-down menu is going to give you your other options because only 5 will fit on this page. So you can just pop between your point counts like that. I have a question that if you see the same Canada goose for the whole point count, would you put it in for both minutes 1 to 3 and 4 to 5? Note when you're doing point counts, the way that they're run for the Atlas protocol is you're only counting the first observation of them. So if you see the same goose in the first section and the second section, you only record it in the first section. You only put another one in the second section if you have found a different goose. And I assume you only count adults is another comment. That depends on the breeding code that you're using. So for example, if you're using the fledged young code, then you are counting young ones as well. So you can always count young ones as long as you know what species they are. And the breeding evidence code should reflect what you're seeing. Does that make sense, everybody? Let me know if it doesn't. Okay. So then you would again just submit this data, or you submit as a save button in the middle. And then just check and make sure that everything is correct in your point counts, your general atlasing, and in sort of the top here. Okay, I will start a new checklist, and we're just gonna go through importing from eBird. So there is this import from eBird option, and also a couple of notes about using eBird checklists is that some of the breeding evidence codes from eBird are different than the breeding evidence codes for the atlas. So if you are using eBird checklists, use the breeding evidence codes that are already in eBird. Don't try and use the NatureCounts ones or the atlas ones. And they'll automatically change to the proper ones when you import the checklist like this. And then you can click import from eBird. So then it puts a point on the map. Make sure that everything looks correct. Make sure that your information for observation date, duration, all this stuff is right, as well as point counts, etc. You can click continue. This is all the same kind of thing as what we just went through. Just making sure that you have all the right information. So this is where it's going to be helpful for you to say only show species with data. That's just going to put the list of what you've already submitted data for. And actually, I just made this as a fake checklist, and I don't have anything in here. So, for example, if something like this happens, then you have to make your list in here. Make sure that you have breeding evidence if there is breeding evidence. Because if you submit your checklist to the atlas without breeding evidence, it's not nearly as useful to us as if it does have breeding evidence. So I'm just going to delete this since it's not real. Okie dokie. So that is importing from eBird. So the last thing I'm going to go through is how to use the NatureCounts app. So for the NatureCounts app, you can use it on a mobile device. You can use it when you're in data or in an offline mode. So it's really handy like that. They did just put out a new update to it. So if you've been using it before and struggling a bit, I'd recommend trying it again. It might be a bit easier to use now. I think they really did a lot of work on usability. So you can find it for iPhones or Android. You can find it in the Google Play Store or the Apple Store. And you'll just search for NatureCounts. It's all one word. It'll be under Birds Canada, and you can download it from there. Once you've downloaded it and opened it, it's going to give you this screen here, and you'll log in with the login information, your username and password that you used when you registered for the Atlas online, and then click login. Again, if you haven't already registered for the Atlas, you can click sign up and it'll bring you over to the registration page. Once you've logged in, for the first time, it's going to ask you to select your project. You'll be selecting the Newfoundland Breeding Bird Atlas. Once you've logged in the first time, you won't have to do this part again. You can then click confirm. And then it will bring you over to this page here, where it shows you your profile information. And I'll just bring your attention to the bottom here. This is how these 3 sections are going to be visible on the app at all times. It has your profile, which just has this information about your name and the project, that sort of thing. It has this checklists section, and it has a create section. So the checklist section is where any draft checklist is going to go. So you can, while you're putting in a checklist, you can save it as a draft. It will go here. Or if you're doing an offline checklist, when you go to submit it, it won't be able to be submitted because you're offline, but it will go here and you can go and submit it later. And the last section on the bottom is the create option. And this is where you're going to go to create a new checklist anytime you start atlasing. So when you do create a new checklist, it's going to automatically update the date and time with the current date and time when you start that checklist. If you're trying to enter in a checklist from a different time or date, you can change these by clicking on the little calendar and the down arrow here. You could change that information. The same way, it's going to automatically have this starting point as the point where you are currently standing. So if this is from a different location, then you can go to edit and you can change that. And I know there had been some trouble with that in previous versions of the app, but that section here is quite a lot better now as well. And so for general atlasing, you'll click general atlasing here, and then you can scroll down to the bottom. You'll be able to press continue. That's going to bring you to this screen. And this is where you have all of the species information. So again, you'll be able to scroll through all of the species list, or you can search in the search bar, and it'll pop up all of the ones that have your search information, and then you can enter in your information from there. You can again type in the 4-letter bird code or the entire bird name. So you are going to put in breeding evidence here. It's under this column. You can press the plus button and it will bring up either a grid view for breeding evidence where it just has the codes, and it will bring, or you can click it over to list view, which is an option at the top, and it will have the names, which is sometimes easier to remember. Again, it's going to have these ones with some exclamation marks. If you click on those, it will give you the reason for the caution, and you can either confirm that that's what you wanted to use, or you can cancel it and pick a different breeding evidence code. So that you're also going to be putting in the count information. This is the number of individuals. You can press this button. You just click on it over and over to add one individual at a time. But if you have a lot of individuals, let's say you saw like 20 at a time, you can also press and hold that button, and then you can actually type in the number. Your keypad will pop up from the bottom. You can do the same thing, press and hold. If you accidentally put in the wrong number there and you need to fix it, you'll be able to fix it by pressing and holding. So that's a good one to know. We also have this funny little 3 lines here beside species name. And if you click this, it'll pop up with these options. These are much like on the online version, where you can show rarities. You can show subspecies and forms, which is going to be things like duck species or woodpecker species, that kind of thing. Or you can click only show species expected to breed in your Atlas region, which will just decrease the list of options a little bit. If you do click show rarities, it's going to come up like this, and all of the rare species are going to have this R in a yellow box. if you have a rare species, you're going to want to click on, if you just click on the section with the name, it will pop up over here with this details box. And you can click on add, and then you'll be able to type in details about that rare species. This is the same information as we talked about earlier about location, what the bird looked like, what it was doing, all that sort of thing, how many of them there were. You can also, for some of the species, put in breeding evidence codes, but for some of the species, you will not be able to because it's not expected to breed here. Again, it's important here then to add that information in the details section. There is also just updated, so I don't have a picture of it yet. You can now add on the app the coordinates of a specific individual like you could on the online version. And so in this section of details, you'll also be able to add those coordinates as well. Okay, so we'll just go to these three options at the top. This is of the sort of general screen when you're in the species list we were just in with the full species list. And then we also have this section, My List. This just shows you the species that you've entered information for. And so again, if you want to edit things or just see what you've already got, you can go to the My List section and they'll all be here. If you want to delete a species, you can click on the name and then you'll have the option to delete it there, and you can say, yes, you want to clear it or to cancel that. And there is also the last sort of tab on the top is the map, and that just shows you where exactly you are on a map at the current time. And this is helpful to make sure that you're staying within the square boundaries, that sort of thing. So you can click on that map at any time. It'll show you where you are. And up here in the top corner, you're also going to have these three dots. Here you can go to editing the checklist setup. That was the very first page that we had, where you were selecting general atlasing or point counts, as well as your starting location, time, and date. So you can click on that. You can also save it as a draft, or you can discard the entire checklist. Once you're done entering your information, you can go down here to review checklist. And that will bring you over to this, this screen here. These three pictures are all from one screen, just scroll down. So you'll be able to check the date and time, the starting point, the number of observers you'll be able to add in. You can put in checklist comments, and you'll be able to pick if you're doing a stationary traveling count or incidental observation, the duration, the distance, and whether or not you were entering a complete checklist. And then click next, it'll bring you over to your species list. So here, just check that everything is correct, that all the breeding evidence is there that you need, that the counts are correct, and then you can click submit. If you are in data or in internet, then it will say thank you for your checklist submission because it will submit it. If you are offline, then it will kick it to that checklist draft section that I showed you earlier that is an option on the app screen. And then you can go to start a new checklist for your next one. And we'll just go quickly through how to do this if you're doing a point count. So much of it is the same as we had on the online version. When you start the checklist, you just click point count instead. As always, you can change the location, you can change the date and time, and then you'll click start checklist. Again, you'll notice once you go into the species section that is split up into 1 to 3 minutes and 4 to 5 minutes. This is where you're putting the number of individuals for each of those times. When you're using the app for doing point counts, you can't put general atlasing information in as well. So you're just doing one checklist for the one point that you were doing your point count at. And then you just do a separate checklist for general atlasing between point counts. When you're doing a point count list, the breeding evidence column doesn't show up. Instead, you're going to have to click on the species name. So just tap on the species name and it pops up with the breeding evidence box. You can click edit and add in a breeding evidence there. And it also has the details box where you can add details as we discussed earlier. And so all of the same options are in the species list about adding rarities and seeing your list and that sort of thing. And then just click review checklist and it will submit it as well. Do feel free to get in touch through email to myself at jmcdermott@birdscanada.org or to the Atlas office, which is nlatlas@birdscanada.org. And thanks everybody for coming. I'm glad you could all join.